when I deployed to basic training in November of 1992, I remember when I got off the bus, the drill sergeant told me, "You guys were probably the stupidest privates to join the military in the middle of winter in Missouri." And I remember that day to the day I die, and it was quite an eye-opening experience.
First thing I did was ride the bus to Great Lakes, and when we arrived there, they made us empty our pockets and stand in file in a line, and started using a few choice words to line us up and kind of tell us that we were in the military now. We belonged to them. So that's basically my first episode with the U.S. Navy.
I got the draft notice when I was drafted. I got the draft notice in the mail to report to the local draft board. When I got there, there was probably 10 to 12 buses, and we were loaded on those buses. Back then, you could only get about 40 people on a bus. Nowadays, they can get 60 or more on a school bus. These were buses similar to school buses, and but they had the Army green color, and we were transported to Louisville to the induction center. And once we got there, there was 5 or 6 guys I grew up with that we, stayed close together throughout that ordeal. And that night, they housed us in motels. But that night, Pat Feaster, Dale Campbell, and Duke Hughes, we all stayed in the same motel room. We worked it out where we could be together, talking about the unknown, the unknown of being in the Army, being in the military. So I was with some local guys right up until the time we kind of got separated once we were inducted into the service.
My dad died shortly before I went in the military, and the last thing he said, well, he was in the VA hospital, and he was watching the news about Vietnam, and he said, "That darn war," but he didn't use the word darn. And then he said, "Bob, I hope you never go in the military, but if you do, go in the Navy. Don't go in the Army." And I went in the Army, and I went to, I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina for boot camp. My first night there, I said I should have listened to my dad, but I'd do it again. I was totally ignorant. I never had a weapon in my hand before. And the first night they said, "We're going to have a GI party." I go, "Hey, this is fun." I didn't realize what it was. A GI party was you stripped down a perfectly good floor, and then you had to put more wax on it and buff it. I thought it was going to be a nice party. So I had to learn a whole new language.
Well, looking back at it now, you're pretty much a child. You're a teen, not teen is a teenager. And at that age, you're used to doing what the adults say, and they tell you plenty to do, so you just do what they told you to do, stand where they told you to stand. And the initiation going into military is the haircut, the clothes, and a little bit of changeover and isolated at a training camp. And it begins the process of changing you into something. And it's pretty much what you expect. Advanced Boy Scouts is what it looks like to me now.
It wasn't very difficult to adjust to military life. I was an athlete in high school. I was still in real top physical condition. And the military, at the beginning was all about conditioning, exerting ourselves physically, doing push-ups, running, carrying our gear, marching for long distances. So it wasn't difficult at all for me to adjust. Eating, the food was good. We had 3 meals a day. The only difference was there was no time to get a snack in between meals. And, you know, trying to adjust to sleeping with, we have bunks side by side, double bunks, and trying to sleep and get adjusted to that aspect of it was very difficult. Have one bathroom that had probably 10 shower stalls and maybe 10 commodes on one room, and that was kind of something to get adjusted to. But other than that, they fed us well in our training. You know, we had a roof over our head, a nice place to sleep, just so many of us together.
It's all a change and to be accepted and to move into, but being young and pliable, it was nothing you couldn't handle or overcome. It was, like I said, it was like advanced Boy Scouts. A little rougher. They were a little rougher than Boy Scouts, but basically the same idea, a little more advanced.
When I went in the military, I had to adjust to a different lifestyle. Very regimented. My father being a Vietnam vet, I did learn some of that from him through him being my father. And I took to it very well, and I liked that structure. And I felt like that was a good calling for me. It felt like I really belonged there. And I really like the camaraderie that you have in the military that it's hard to find in the civilian world. And I do miss that.
Going through BUDS, it was a minute-to-minute thing. Going through boot camp, which was before BUDS, was like a week-to-week thing. So BUDS was much harder than the regular boot camp that we went through. But I would just keep telling myself that you can do this thing and get through it. And when I got to BUDS, the guys around you would help you a lot with hanging in there and sticking with it.
Double pneumonia in boot camp. I was really sick, and I had about a week and a half to go. And at that time, if you missed more than 3 days, you had to go through boot camp again. My first day in the hospital, I didn't know I was there. I woke up the next night, and I go, "Where am I?" He says, "You're in the hospital." Okay? And so the second day, the third day, I'm still sick. I'm terrible sick. And I'm begging the doctors, "Let me go, let me go, let me go." And they says, you can't go. I says, "I can't take boot camp again. Let me go." So they let me go. Oh, every step I took, my head just pounded. Well, that day we had to go to range. I forgot what the range was, like 5 miles out. So I had to march out there. My head is just splitting. I can barely breathe. And I get out there and qualify. I can't even see the targets. I got the worst score in the camp history. And the sergeant called me all kinds of names, but my worst score still might be the worst score.
My duties in the military was, first of all, everyone in the military, you're all infantry to begin with. That's your basic training. But I also was a military police, and I learned a lot of things, a lot of different missions that military police had to do. And also, again, I was trained as an air conditioning heating mechanic in the early days, and I learned a lot about generators and power equipment, stuff like that.
My duties in BUDS was just to get through it. After going to Vietnam, it was a lot of search and destroy missions, trying to capture certain people and interviewing them and obtaining information. And then, of course, some things that I won't mention that bring some bad memories back.
So I was attached to 173rd Infantry in the Central Highlands, and at times also on the Central Coastal Land. and we'd escort the infantry out. They weren't in our 173rd that we were with, they were in trucks, and so we'd take them out and be with them and guard them, or take them to a position and then protect them as far as we could, and then when go back and pick them up. Or else we guard combat engineers and go out and protect them. And then our day would begin before dawn, and then we'd get ready, we'd go pick them up, and if we'd stay out there, we could stay out for weeks, okay, and just, or we'd take them out, bring them back in, and then we'd have perimeter guard. They'd have to come through us, enemy had to come through us, and we pull 2 2-hour guard duties, which meant that we got anywhere from 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night. That was it. And then up again, do the whole thing again. And so the whole time I was in Vietnam, the most I ever got to sleep was probably around 4 hours a night.
In a basic way, trained as a infantry soldier was my training. And it's multiple weapons, multiple tactics, and getting you as good as they can into the mindset. And I'd like to say up front that when you ran into the real thing, which what I ran into was being infantry, I was assigned through some paperwork and replacement and filtering out to where you got with who you're going to be with. But it's what you call a line company. And their only job was to operate as an attack force in the jungles of Vietnam. And that's the only thing I did the whole time I was there.
I went over as a replacement. I thought that I'd be, this was in 1970. Now I thought I was be going over to drive a tank. And so I go, okay, I can handle that. So I get to Vietnam. I didn't know a soul. When we're flying in, I looked at, it was at night, I look out, had the misfortune of seeing a firefight. And I go, oh Lord, what am I getting into? And I see the tracers, Americans, we had red tracers, Viet Cong had green. And you can see this, and I go, oh. And we land, and well, I think it was about 2 days later, a day or 2 days later, I can't remember now, but anyway, I was told that I'd be going into artillery. I go, artillery? I don't know the first thing about artillery. I was engineer, I drove tanks. Okay, I drove tanks for 6 months. I'm a tank driver. He said, don't worry about it. It was an old tank. They took the turret off, and they put a tub on it, and it has 2 barrels. I'm speechless. I go, I'm thinking of a bathtub, you know, and 2 barrels. I just can't figure this thing out. And this is it's a small tank. It's open turret, and it's 4th to the 60th, 4th Battalion, 60th Artillery, and Charlie Battery. I go, well, what's Charlie Battery? The guy's face just turned white and says, you'll find that out too. Come to find out, it was an anti-aircraft division. It was not used against aircraft, but against personnel. It was 40 millimeters. We could fire up to 240 in a minute. We also had an M60 machine gun on it, and it weighed half what the M60 did. It was 25 tons. I had a crew of 5. There was 4 up in the turret, and a driver. And when I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. I thanked God that I'd be a driver, because I wouldn't want to be up in a turret to be responsible to fire that thing. I shook. You know, I never saw anything like this. My first, it was that. Well, day 2 came, and I think it was, and they said, we're going to train you how to drive this thing. I was used to driving an M60 tank. And so, long story short, I blew my driving test. I drove it like a tank, rather than an open turret. And these guys are hanging on for life. Okay, and I get to the end, and I thought I did a real good job, like a male peacock. I'm just ready for my sergeant to give me, boy, you drove good. He jumps off, and I'm wondering, why is this guy's knuckles white? And his face is beet red, you know, and he was hanging on for dear life. And he just cursed me out, and he says, a driver you're not. And my life just sunk. And right then, the Lord just spoke to my heart and said, when you're out of control, when you're in control, you're out of control. I forgot the lesson. And then 2 days later, I was told that I'd be a gunner. And that was the beginning of my nightmare.
It goes from being a normal human with normal parameters to another planet that has no rules and no experience and nothing close to normal that you've ever known. It all goes away, and you quickly have to go into that mode and that world and able to survive too. Very, very huge, tremendous. 46 or 7 years ago right now for me, and it's still one of the biggest things in my mind.
The kind of combat that I witnessed being a military police, I did a lot of escort convoys where we would drive all over the country, and we would do like security for like engineers, water trucks, food trucks. We also run a lot of prisoners to different camps or pickups and drop-offs. And I was a gunner, and I was the guy that was in the top of the turret of the Humvee. And we got shot at a lot while we were driving, but most of the time we would just keep going because it was safer to keep going than to stop. Probably the biggest memory that I have is one night we got mortared. We got mortared regularly, but one night we got mortared. And being a prisoner of war camp, we had 10,000 prisoners being guarded by 300 MPs. And the mortars killed almost 60 prisoners of war. And one of my actions is what stopped the attack, because I was just in the right position at the right time to put suppression fire down on the mortar team. And this was very dark, so it was hard to see, but that was very traumatic, because I remember they were stacking the bodies like cardboard or like wood, and the helicopters would come in for hours picking up the wounded. And I just remember the screams and the sheer panic of the attack, and thankfully no U.S. soldiers got killed that night.
In Vietnam, the process was, as they lost people, either finished their cycle or were wounded or were dead, they like refilled those positions. And if my training was infantry, so when they needed a replacement at one of those line companies, that's where I went. And you are come in there as one or two of you to replace. If they've had a big fight, there'll be enough to replace what they lost. And those men that you're just thrown out there in that jungle with them, they've already been there, different stages for different men. But it gets complicated. First, you're the new guy, and there's an unwritten law that new guys have a different place in that environment. And it evolves into you find your place.
A lot of those memories I have will be stuck with me forever, but probably the one memory that I remember the most is trying to help some of the children over there that were so impoverished. And I would always tell my mother to send me extra care packages with toys and crowns and stuff like that, because I felt like I had to be something good besides just a soldier.
Well, I have one memory that when I received the Bronze Star, there was me and another SEAL working together on something we call a SEER assignment, and we were cutting wire at a POW camp. And one of our jets came over that the Army had called for an airstrike. They were over fighting not too far off from where we were at, but they didn't know we were there. And one of our jets came over and dropped out a 500-pound bomb where we were at. And it blew me up in a tree. And the combustion from the bomb knocked me out, blew me up in this tree, and then that's how it hurt my neck. And then I fell out of the tree and I landed back here. But my buddy had got his leg blown off. So I put a tourniquet on it and started our guns and radio and everything else. I don't know where they were. They were blown to bits. And so I carried him for quite a ways, and because I was afraid we'd be captured by the VC, the Viet Cong. And I ran into an Army Ranger. He called for the medevac for me, and I put my buddy on the medevac. And I never heard any more about him. So years went by, and in 2012, I went to a reunion, and he showed up at the reunion. So that's I was. So that was a memory I'll never forget.
There has to be an acceptance, and it comes a little bit slow. And you find yourself moving into that acceptance at this point when you arrive. And later on, you see new people arrive, and you put them in the position that the people before you put you in when you came. And it has a whole order of its own. Well, this is probably not what you're looking for, this side of it. There may be too much detail for what you're looking for. Anyway, you become a member of a trusted group. And everybody's heard the brothers, but I have brothers and sisters. But there's something there that no one has with any brother or sister.
Always went in sister tracks. So there's five on each track, and then a chief between, so there's 11 of us. And we became so close. I can still hear their breaths. You know, you could tell who's breathing. You know, and you still hear their voices. And it's if I didn't know their names.
I served some very strong friendships, camaraderie, and also a band of brothers. I have 4 or 5 friends that we get together every Memorial Day that I served with, and we don't get to see each other much, and it's a very strong bond that we have. And we get together every Memorial Day for a weekend, and we hang out and we talk, and I cherish them, and they love me like a brother, and I love them like a brother also.
And the Navy SEALs, we were tight as you can get. There was 8 of us. We were on SEAL Team 1. And I was closer with them than I was my own family. You would put your life in those guys' hands, and you'd give your life up for them. And they likewise for you. It was, like I say, it was tighter than being with my family. And when I first got out, I felt lost because of the camaraderie and the tightness and the way we felt about each other and the honor and the respect that you had for each other.
Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning, hush. I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Hoo-yah.
I was one of those days, and I actually have a picture there that pertains to that. It was like a lot of other things. You go out, and it turned out to be my last time going out. On that mission, like the 10th day out there in the jungle on that mission, I was wounded. And in a fight, in what we called a firefight, medevac helicopter came, and me and some more men that had been wounded were extracted with the jungle penetrator. The helicopter hovers above the trees, and that's a penetrator down through the trees. It's a pointed device that'll go down through the limbs. And it has a seat, paddle seats that will fold out, and they have a winch cable, and they'll drag you back up through the trees and on the helicopter to depart. That's how I came out of the jungle into a hospital, sometime in Vietnam, some surgery, to Japan, not very long there, but maybe another surgery there, and then to the United States in a hospital, which came through a couple of hospitals, but wound up as near to your home, which was Fort Knox for me, and I wound up at Fort Knox in the hospital.
I returned home civilian flight, which is kind of funny. That's how I ended up going over. But when we returned, it was really early in the morning, and we were very tired. It's like a 22-hour flight. We're dirty, we're filthy, we're tired. But we know we're going home, but we're just exhausted. We're trying to analyze everything we've been through, because now we're going home. We're thinking about all the things we couldn't think about. And I remember when we come to Maine. I don't know the airport, but I remember when we landed, it was 2:30 in the morning, and when we stepped off the plane to walk into the actual terminal, there was hundreds of Vietnam vets there to welcome us. And I'll never forget that.
I was well received by family, certainly. There's no question about that. They were really happy to see me, and just it tickled to death. And of course, I was the same way. I was glad to be back, glad to reunite with family. Community was somewhat well received by our local community. The question, though, how was I received, or how was we received upon our returns? When I came back into California and came off the tarmac there walking into the airport, there were people throwing lettuce at us. They were throwing oranges at us. But there was this big chain link fence that was about 12 foot high. Otherwise, the things would have been hitting me and the other guys that was walking on the tarmac of that airport there, airstrip. We wasn't received very well in California.
Well, I was received by my family like they really missed me, and was proud of me. But as far as the public and the American people, they didn't. They would call us names and different things, baby killers and names like that, which it really upset me when I came home and we were greeted at the airport, which was San Francisco. That's where I flew into. And so it was an unpleasant experience coming home as far as the American public. But my family was good.
You know, as far as the war, I came back from the war. I left Vietnam, but I don't know if the war ever left me. The war stayed with me, and it's been a tough ordeal to deal with. But battles go on all the time, you know, and so I'd say the war's still going on in some regards.
Comparing notes with other veterans I know, I actually was so glad. I had, in my opinion, less problems than a lot of Vietnam veterans did. And I found out later there's some clinical reasons for that. But I was so glad to be alive, so glad to be out of that place and back to what I thought was normal life, that I went for quite a while of picking back up with normalcy. Everything was good to me. Every day looked good. I stepped over that just like stepping over a mud puddle. And I was in, I thought, very good condition after I got out of the hospital and out of the Army. And I raised a family, did well.
It took a long time to get adjusted to let me say, to where I can be a good person, to where I'll do things that will not only benefit me but benefit other people. I was numb for years, and the PTSD classes that I go to has helped me with that. Now I'm able to have a halfway normal life as far as my family and being able to let my emotions out and enjoy things where before I would, like I said, I'd stay numb. I wouldn't go places. I wouldn't do things I used to do. And now I play music for some of the nursing homes, and also for the veterans associations. I'll go and play and sing for them, and so it's I've adjusted finally in my late years of my life to where it's turning into a good life.
It's been a process, I think. When I first arrived home in 1968, I tried to get back in with some people I knew. They were different, I thought, and I found out it was me that was a little bit different. I felt much older than them. I felt like I got to understand that I was 20-year-old, so I felt like I was 45, maybe. even close to 50. And it was very difficult. I found myself dating much older ladies. I didn't date the 20-year-old or the 18, 19-year-old. I was dating a lot of times older people. So a couple of guys I knew, we went down to watch the state tournament down in Louisville at that time it was. Johnny Noel and Charlie Brown and I went out. Charlie was in the Army at that time, so we met him. Johnny and I met Charlie Brown down there in Louisville. And they were talking about getting a date. Johnny says, Charlie, can you get me a date? And he says, yeah, we'll all have a date, but we're going to have to go by the nursing home to get Taylor a date. You know, they knew that I liked, I guess, they knew that my age was much older than what it actually was.
The wartime experience has affected my life, and I've been thinking about this. Some good ways and some bad ways. The good ways, I think it's made me appreciate things more in life that we really take for granted over here. When you go without a shower for a year, when you can only drink water, being dirty and filthy all the time, having water to shave and brush your teeth, and little things like that you never really even think about, you take for granted. But when you go without those things for a long time, it makes you appreciate things like that, running water and electricity and stuff like that. And it has really opened my eyes to a lot of things. It seems like being a combat veteran, you've developed almost a sixth sense that you can really see danger where other people might not see it, because your body and mind have forced you to adapt to that, to survive in a war environment. And it's been like that for, I'm sure, thousands of years with other soldiers. And I think that's a good thing for me. Some people call it paranoia, but it just, you're more aware of your surroundings. Some of the bad effects of it, though, with the PTSD, is relationships and anger issues, depression, alcohol or drug abuse, things like that. And you're trying to escape what you're fighting inside, and sometimes the only way you can do that is isolation, or the alcohol and drugs. It's not all bad, but it's things that I know I'm a changed person coming back.
There's a lot of memories I have, and one of the things that drags me down is all the negative things that happened in war override or dominate all the good things that may have happened. All the pleasurable memories get blocked out because of all the bad things that occurred. There has been, I went 42 years without having a firearm because I didn't want to pull the trigger again. And about 6 years ago, I bought a BB gun for my grandson to see, to show him how to use a BB gun safely. And I got that BB gun out myself and shot it a few times to see if I could still shoot, and I could. I could still shoot. And but I still didn't have a firearm. And I think some of the other veterans that I socialize with from time to time invited me to go to the firing range with them, and I told them I couldn't go. I didn't have a firearm. Oh, we'll loan you a firearm. And eventually I went out and bought me a firearm, and was able to again once to shoot a rifle. But there's a lot of emotional attachment to pulling a trigger. Pulling a trigger is not a very pleasurable thing. So for any future people that may be watching this video, it's a serious thing. You know, a gun don't kill people. People kill people. Whether it's in war or whether it's out here on the street. A firearm, you know, I do have one for self-defense. And that's the only thing it'd be used for is if someone were to break into my home and try to harm my family. I would once again have to pull the trigger.
Out of the corner of my eye, I see a Viet Cong sneaking up on me with a drawn knife. Instinctively pivoting my body's weight upon the bottom of my right foot, I turn, chopping the weapon out of his hand. I sense his dread and my rush for survival. It's him or me. I have to complete the maneuver. It is beyond my control, as all my training and combat experience kick in to finish the job. I can feel his breath, which means I have less than a second and only inches between life and death. I want to close my eyes, but can't, lest I miss the mark and he wins and I die. Robert, my wife of 38 years, yells as I face her in the kitchen of our home in the Appalachian Mountains of southeastern Kentucky. There we stand inches apart in two different worlds, within a loving home strained by post-traumatic stress disorder. Cheryl's eyes are the size of saucers and her lovely face flushed of all color. My eyes are focused and my face stern. As we stand looking at each other, all I can say is, "You startled me." Cheryl is speechless, frozen in fear. "I suppose I better make an appointment to see Dr. Dunn," I softly say, in a broken voice of disbelief of what could have happened. "Yes, you better," Cheryl says, as she backs up from me, guiding herself with her hand on the kitchen island overflowing with stuff. Stuff, so much stuff yet to deal with that neither of us knew had come to the surface. Our lives could have been transformed into something resembling our disarranged kitchen island. A family forever changed, a murderer standing over his dead wife. Over what? A pan. A lousy pan. Cheryl was bringing me a pan which she thought I would use to make breakfast. Instead, she stepped into my world of PTSD, in which I am constantly on guard. The VA psychologists call it hypervigilance. We combat veterans with PTSD call it survival. Time has moved on since that episode in 2013, but it remains a constant reminder to Cheryl of a time when she was paralyzed by raw fear. It remains a concern to me of Cheryl's wondering of a future repeat. We walk side by side and hand in hand together, two hearts knit together by love and trust. We, however, walk in two different worlds, never losing sight of each other. It is faith, hope, and love that holds us together and keeps us close. Welcome to our world. Some of you will instantly understand and identify with the previous and that which will follow. Some of you will struggle to understand. If so, thank God, for you do not have PTSD.
Is that I was running, you know, and PTSD, people with PTSD handled me. I ran, and it's just when we're on a duster, we're never in a place long. You know, we're all over the place, and I took that with me. Never got much sleep. And I took that with me. And not knowing what I was doing, I'd be in a place, and after a year I was ready to leave. And I stuck it out. It wasn't until recently, through the efforts of the VA here and the care I'm getting, that I had to admit what I was doing. You know, that PTSD had me. And didn't know what it was. didn't know the depths of it. And then in 2007, here, my life fell apart. And my wife was in Minnesota. I can't remember if it was her dad or her mom was dying. So I drove her all the way up to Minnesota, and I drove all the way back. And boy, just my two adult daughters are with us, living with us, and my life, I didn't even know what was happening to me. My daughters went to one of the persons over me and said, it's okay if we move to the guest house. I was scaring them. They were afraid of their father. I didn't know what was going on. And my wife came back, picked her up from the airport, never said a word to her. Not a word. She got home and never said a word. I said, Rob, what's going on? Never said a word. She burst into tears. The only time I saw her in tears. And I start realizing I need help. And so anyway, I called the VA. Hardest thing I ever did. I didn't want it, but I knew something was wrong. You know, I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor. This stuff's not supposed to be happening.
Problems turned up later on, later for me. And I figured out some of the reasons was, it's been explained to me that if you'll stay plenty busy, and my job was very demanding, and something like that keeps you full-time occupied, and you just never get back to spending any time, and I made a point not to. And come to find out, there's a built-in human tactic to avoid certain things, and I got real good at it. Didn't realize what I was doing, but looking back, it was survival.
As the years went on, I started having some problems adjusting back to civilian life, and some of my problems started coming up with PTSD. And now, 10 years later, I still struggle with a lot of things, though I am working and going through treatment, trying to deal with what I went through being in Iraq.
I remember saying, Robert, are you there? I go, yeah. And he says, Mom. And then he says, Mr. Schulten, you still there? You still there? I go, yeah. I go, you still haven't answered our question. And I went silent again for another few minutes. I said, Schulten, you still there? You still there? I go, yeah. You still haven't answered our question. With one eye. And he said, do you want to harm yourself? I go, no. But I've tried. But no, I'm not now. And then I'm praying the whole time, God, don't let my wife come in and hear this. I don't know what's going on. How in the world am I going to explain it to her?
Some things are life lessons, and I always try to take advantage of anything that I get my hands on. And I took advantage of all the positives that you learn out of a situation like that and used them, still do. But there's some negatives that go with the territory, and they can be very troublesome to deal with, the negatives that go with the territory. And it changed for us. I'm not sure how it changed, but change majorly. It's actually some places you go, and I can say this now. I couldn't have said this for 35 years. In that process, you go some places that you never come back from. And for me, with VA's help, you learn to survive in a normal society with that history.
A little bit later, I wound up November and December of 2007. I was in the Lexington VA hospital, PTSD, in-house, and basically locked me up for 6 weeks. And probably the best thing ever happened. I had to deal with stuff. But I did something stupid. I fought it. And I fought it so hard I had a stroke. And then eventually I had to tell him, I can't read this stuff. What do you mean you can't read it? It's just letters coming up. So after all that, I had to go up to the Lexington VA weekly, a couple of times a week, for months, for speech therapy, to learn how to read again, and concentration. So it's, it did a job on me. But I'm still here. My wife still loves me. My children love me. My congregation loves me. I love me. My God loves me. But I didn't realize the depths of it. But while there, I had a flashback. I went to, they have a little room. You can go get crafts. I went and got a craft. I went to the day room. You know, and I know why I'm there, but I don't know the depth of it. And I had a moccasin. I was going to make a moccasin. And so I laid everything out. You know, here's the sole of the moccasin, and then the long leather stitching. And I put that long cord into the needle. And I went to put that needle into the hole, into that sole. I had a flashback. When I was 5 years old, my father, who was a World War II veteran, didn't speak much. Didn't speak at all, hardly. Very good man, very kind man, but boy, could he explode. Went back to, when I was 5 years old, he was in a VA hospital in Chicago. They called it a nervous breakdown. And they made my sister a pair of moccasins. Huh. 50-some years later, I'm in the VA hospital, doing the same thing for the same reason. Didn't know the depth of it. Now I can understand my father. I can understand my uncles. But it took a long time.
Once you're over there and then you come home, you start thinking of why was I there? And there's always a political reason for war. There's always something that's involved politically. And reading history and reading like World War II and Vietnam and Korea and all these other wars that I've studied as a young man, you don't see that side of the war as the political stuff, and it makes you more hesitant to want to go to war. The younger people, younger than me, because I can't go to war anymore, but I'm too old. But there's a lot of young people out there, and when I hear people talking about, well, we going to war with other countries, it makes me sad, because most people who make these decisions have probably never been in war and don't know what it really is. And there's an old saying that all soldiers come home wounded, and you think about that it does change you, and I hate to see anyone go through some of the things that I had to go through, and other guys that went through in other eras of wars, and some of the awful things they had to go through and see.
I think that I was ready. I was a patriotic young person. I was ready to do my duty and serve my country. That's what I was supposed to do, and I knew that. But I think that while I was in combat, I recognized that right away that our leaders should be doing things they weren't doing. For example, they would send us out on patrols, and we were human bait for the enemy to draw the enemy out, just to find out for sure where they're at. So our main part of our company could come in and take the enemy out. They were willing, our military was willing to sacrifice lives so they could take lives of the enemy.
Those type decisions, wherever they're made, and our nation has a system supposedly that the people of the nation speak, and leaders supposedly are to listen. And those decisions is the steering mechanisms for our nation and for our people and our survival of our society. So it needs to be, from my opinion, with more consideration than it's been for a long time, including Korea, Vietnam, and the most recent, these Mideast wars that the United States, our people, our equipment, our blood, and our money have been involved in. There needs to be all the consideration and all the caution that you could apply.
Just to realize that war is not fun and games. These kids have got these video games now that they're playing, and they push a button and it kills the enemy, or they push a button and it kills the monster. It isn't like that. Combat is not like that. It isn't fun and games. It's only fun and games for people that's never been in war. War is a very serious thing. And if we're in war, we should go all out with all we've got to finish the war and take the enemy out as fast as possible, and not tarry on for 10 years or 12 years or 13 years. It needs to be done and get it over with as quick as possible.
One thing I've heard said concerning this Iraq and Afghan war, I heard a lot of people say it, and it's addressing what went on with the Vietnam soldier when he came back. The line is, I'm against the war, but I support the troops. And I see where they're going with that, which is an important part. But in my opinion, you really can't support a soldier that's giving his blood, laying his life, paying the ultimate prices, and investing himself, and not be and be against what he's doing it for. I don't think you can separate that. But as far as it's gone, the change that's come, it's been a change for the better.
We will always need a military. Always will. And I'm afraid our nation's not ready for what could be. We're too complacent. too undisciplined. We haven't seen a war on our shores. And I pray to God we don't. But I also hope to pray that we don't have one. But you always got to be prepared. The Bible says there'll be wars and rumors of wars. And so we're going to have young men and women, families, be able to step up. But also families within the nation to step up to support them. Right now, less than 1% of eligible people are serving in the military. I'd like to ask the question, what percentage of 99 are praying for them and thinking about them? I hope they are. America's a great nation.
Stand up, be counted, be heard, and love their country, because we live in the greatest country in the world. And I would hope they would support the country and do the right things that they should do in life. And if you start something that's good, finish it and do a good job at it, and don't be lazy.
Again, the military has been so good to me, and I do love it and I cherish it, and even though I'm out now, I've been out now since 2005, but there's not a day that I don't wake up and I don't feel like I'm still there. And the military, once a soldier, always a soldier. And I didn't understand that until now. And that's a piece of me that I guess I'm proud of. And I miss it. I miss serving, and I would encourage anyone that wanted to do it, if that's what they wanted to do it, because it was a it was a wild ride, and it was something I'll take to my grave.
I thank God for my time in the military. I thank God for my time in Vietnam with my crews. I wouldn't want to go through it again. We need, how can I put it? I wish, I pray that the morality in the military be the morality in civilian life. That the discipline in the military be the discipline in civilian life. Yes, sir, and no, sir. You have a job to do, do it. You didn't live for yourself. If you lived for yourself, everyone's going to die. You live for the other person. You got to do that. When we were on our crew for 10 months, it wasn't about me. It was about our crew, our family. The crew became the family. It was about them. And then it wasn't just about us. We had to protect everyone behind us. So it's about all of them. That's what's missing, it seems. So when we become number one, it destroys everything. And so I guess it would be don't put first. Be right with the Lord. Be right with each other. Love. Love. It's a lot harder than you think. Be prepared to say, I'm sorry.